future consumption. So Josephus was a general in the Jewish army during the Great Revolt in Judea against the Roman Empire in the Galilee. He lost battles, got captured, and switched sides, and became and adopted Roman ways, but remained Jewish and thought. Oh wait, I gotta shut
So
this
Josephus
down.
was
My
a
mistake. And he then wrote a couple of works explaining Jews and Judaism to the Romans. So he wrote what's called the Antiquities of the Jews, which is his version of like all of Jewish history from Abraham, Adam forward to his own time, and also the Wars of the Jews, which is sort of like a more focused on battles in the recent centuries leading up to his time. But yeah, it's like super long. It's like not the kind of thing that people like that. It's not like I'm going to go read a history of the Revolutionary War of World War II. This isn't sitting down and reading Stephen Ambrose or Ron Chernow or David McCullough or something like that. Like it's a lot more dense.
Thank you.
But it's worthwhile, and he's a great historical source. I tend only to read Josephus when there's a specific reference that I'm like hunting down. Like I don't sit in like page 3. All right, with that we get to dive into the book of Ruth. Maybe for the last session. The bracha for Torah study is Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Asher Kitshanu Mitzvotav V'Tzivanu La'asok B'divrei Torah. And
Rabbi, only do it once today. Only do it once.
We'll stick to we'll keep it in the singular. We've made our way to chapter 4, and I will confess I should have emailed you, Rana. Last week I remember you asked a good question, and then I forgot what the question was. Good. All right.
I don't remember.
I knew I should have jotted it down. Anyway, so last time, so chapter 3 of Ruth had this late night meeting, right? Like where Naomi, hearing about how Ruth had met Boaz, and that he was nice to her, said, "Oh, he's our redeeming kinsman. Go off, sneak up to him in the middle of the night, uncover his feet, and he'll wake up. He'll see you there, like sleeping on the threshing floor at night. And don't say anything. He'll suggest that he's a redeeming kinsman, and you'll be taken care of." Which happens something like that. Ruth, like, is the so there's a vague. There's a vague sort of erotic charge going through the scene. Nothing sexual happens, but it's clear that there's sort of like a sexual charge in the air, but nothing happens, and that's probably deliberate. In that here's a man and a woman alone in a room at night, talking about having a long-term relationship together, but and concerned about what others will think, right? Boaz asked Ruth that she should stay there for the night until morning, then sneak out in the morning before anyone can see her. So there's sort of a clear, we have to make sure people don't talk about this thing going on, but nothing happens, which is supposed to be a testament both to I think primarily to Boaz sort of like acting like a mensch, and then and he gives her some food, and Ruth goes back home to Naomi, who sort of describes what's going to happen next, which is setting up chapter 4.
Okay, I think I remember the question.
Yes.
So the question was, why didn't Naomi go to Boaz during the day and say, you're a redeeming kinsman for Ruth? Why did she do this subterfuge late at night?
Right. With right, and not
it might have been misconstrued as something inappropriate.
Right. Oh, and seems to be like almost designed to be misconstrued
Yes.
as something inappropriate. The So here's what the JPS, which I didn't have with me last week, sort of says. Like, get Naomi revitalized by Ruth's success as a breadwinner and perhaps feeling desperate as she looks around to the future, now proposes that Ruth solicit Boaz, although she stops short of any explicit reference to sexual seduction. She instructs Ruth to groom herself and approach Boaz in the cover of night, etc., etc. The you see, but respectable marital arrangements are usually not contracted in such a stealthily fashion as the one Naomi proposes here. Perhaps the reader is meant to infer that Ruth's Moabite status makes her an unlikely candidate for a legal union, even for good standing in the Israelite community. Perhaps Naomi aims to skirt this issue by contriving a less formal and more personal arrangement for Ruth as Boaz's protege. Some commentators suppose that Naomi is arranging a levirate marriage, yet neither she nor Ruth or Boaz mentions the subject, meaning that they always use the word redeemer rather than lever or yibum, right? It's sort of, this seems to be that they're invoking something similar to levirate marriage, but not precisely that. Furthermore, Boaz does not qualify as a lever, meaning, as the dead, as the surviving brother. Whereas both Naomi and Ruth referred to Boaz as a redeemer, etc., etc. So the that piece suggests that she thinks that because that Ruth's status might make it problematic to take this head on, and the way to do it is to affect Boaz's decision making in a not light of day manner. So either it's something of a seduction, or doing it at night because in the light of day, he might be more likely to think of the negative consequences of bringing in a Moabite, even even if it's clean, i.e., even if it's non-sexual. So that seems to be the going theory on that, because that she doesn't think that it's that it's possible for him, or likely that he's going to want to affect a relationship that way. So that's the best I have for that. Though it's a good question. There's one more thing in that same section of comments in the JPS longer commentary that I think is nice, which almost is a very Kabbalistic take, that it's not proper to have obviously like a unmarried woman and a seemingly unmarried man together alone at night, with covers being moved around, as it were, like even with her just like uncovering feet, like this clearly isn't okay. But that there's idea that something, a dangerous idea, that something truly holy has to have something sinful in it in order to achieve a higher level of holiness. That kedusha, that the highest level of holiness isn't perfectly pure, but rather has something else in it, right? And this on some level is similar, like on Yom Kippur, we often say that, that the repentant sinner can achieve a level of closeness to God that the person who doesn't sin can't have, right? That sort of like that overcoming that engaging with and enjoying something forbidden and then overcoming it is more impressive than never touching it. That it takes more character to like in this, to if you're tempted to substance abuse, it's harder to overcome it and stay away than it is to always abstain. So Auslich, the medieval commentator, says that that holiness must be mixed with something that seems forbidden. As examples, which includes, and this is from a modern commentator, Jacob starts the people of Israel by marrying two sisters, right? Forbidden in the Torah. It's forbidden in the book of Leviticus to marry sisters at the same time. But Jacob founds the people of Israel through something that the Torah forbids. And of course, Judah sleeps with his daughter-in-law, who he thinks is a prostitute. Both of these things you're not supposed to do, but that also helps bring about redemption. That somehow redemption depends on something, something that you're not supposed to be. The very holiness of something great requires it to contain sin. So just like Judah sleeps with his daughter-in-law, Jacob is married to two sisters. Here, the Ruth's connection with Boaz comes about through this sort of improper looking semi-seduction.
Rabbi?
Yep.
Did Boaz have other wives?
We are not told of any.
Could it be that if he did have other wives and they went through the formal Levirate marriage pathway, well, they were being creative, that they could have objected or interfered with it anyway?
Yeah. So that would be another why you shouldn't get to him in the daytime that. So there's a very specific when he's she specifically says catch him at the threshing room floor, and the threshing room floor isn't his home. So same thing. He's definitely 100%. He's definitely out of the house at this night, presumably for harvest reasons, and Naomi specifically says, go to him when he's sleeping in the threshing room.
Rabbi,
Mm-hmm.
what if any were the constraints? I'm not sure I understand this. If a man at that time was unmarried and he was with a woman who was not married consensually,
Mm-hmm.
was that okay?
It's frowned upon, but not forbidden.
Okay.
Meaning that it's not a forbidden relationship, but it's sort of it's a frowned upon relationship. So there is.
But doesn't that make them married?
If they do it with the intent of getting married. So it's.
I'm talking about a consensual one-night stand kind of arrangement.
So same thing. But what Ron is referring to is sometimes it's thought of that way, but halakhically no, meaning that if you have sex with the intention of that sex affecting the marriage, then it does. But if you do it, as the rabbis would say, l'shem znut, just for licentiousness, then it doesn't. The rabbis want to assume that Israelite men don't engage, or Israelite women don't engage in sex for the l'shem znut, for licentious reasons, but only to affect marriage. But it's not quite clear whether that assumption should hold.
Was there prostitutes in?
Yeah.
No, I'm not talking, Ed, I'm not talking about prostitution.
Yeah.
That's a different story.
Yeah, exactly. But so no, it doesn't affect a marriage, and it's frowned upon, but not.
Okay, thank you.
Technically forbidden.
Rabbi, I have a question too. The fact that Ruth was married to a Jew, it doesn't mean that she became Jewish, or does it? I mean, is she always a Moabite even after she became a widow of a Jewish man?
Well, that's sort of the odd thing about this story, is that elsewhere in the Tanakh, it seems that it's the case that for a woman, she just takes her husband's status and presumably remains with it. But again, in the beginning of this story, Orpah reverts back, says, Naomi says, go home to your people, and she does, and your gods, and she does. And Ruth, doesn't, and gives the big conversion, your people be my people speech. But here, and again in chapter 4, will be called a Moabite. Here, actually, for the first time in a moment, we'll start the text. Even Boaz calls her Ruth the Moabite. So it seems usually marriage in the ancient world made you the woman, the whatever her husband was, but that does not seem to be the case here, or at least not entirely. Though again, here it may be less Jewish, might be less the vector that we're thinking about, but Israelite. This may be pre-Jewish, like sort of like the way we think about it as a religion, and more Israelite as an ethnicity. All right, the text, chapter 4. Uvoaz Allah Hashar, and Boaz had gone up to the gate. Now again, the Sha'ar, the gate is like the entrance to the town, and it's the equivalent of the town square. What goes on at the gate here is the way we, like normally that you'd think of like the town square. This is where people meet, people hang out, people the Morristown Green or whatever, right? Like the people meet, people hang out, people chat, people see each other, everyone walks through. Here, formal meetings are also held there. Again, it is more like the town square, the green, even like up to and in revolutionary times or in Spanish colonial times, like where there were town squares. That's what the gate is. It's used for, probably the easiest thing to think of for most people here is to think of Damascus Gate in Jerusalem, like where people like sort of hang out there and like do business there and meet there, or to a certain extent Jaffa Gate, right? Like it's a place to meet and hang out. So that's where he's going, to the town square. And Boaz had gone up to the gate, and he sat down there, and look, the redeeming kin of whom Boaz spoke was passing by. And he said, "Turn aside, sit down here, so and so." And he turned aside and sat down. Now, remember, like when Ruth says in their night encounter, against Naomi's instructions, Naomi said, "Keep quiet, he'll introduce the topic." Ruth in that night encounter was like, "You're my redeeming kinsman. Will you do it?" And he's like, yeah, I will, but there's somebody ahead of me in line. And he doesn't mention the name, and we'll never learn the name. But like this sort of seems to suggest that whatever relation Boaz is, there's somebody who's a closer relation. Maybe Boaz is a second cousin and this is a first cousin, something like that.
The Jewish Study Bible calls him so and so.
Yeah. So and so here, so and so in altar as well. The Hebrew is ploni almoni, which is what the rabbis will use and what will be used in the halakhic literature up till this day for what we would say is John Doe or Joe Sixpack or Chaim Yankel or whatever it is you want it, whatever it is, like whatever your like go-to name for that is, so and so. The Hebrew here actually is ploni almoni, which again is the proper Hebrew for.
Yeah, that's what they have in my book.
Yeah, we're like Mr. X. The like art school assumes that everyone reading it knows what ploni almoni means. So yeah, ploni almoni is John Doe in Hebrew, and so his name is deliberately hidden, either because he's not important to the text, though he sort of is, so that's less likely, or they're trying to save. He's gonna pass on redeeming Ruth. Spoiler alert. So like to spare him the embarrassment of not doing the right of naming the guy who didn't do the right thing, he's left out, possibly, or maybe because the whole point of being the redeeming kinsman isn't necessary. It's not just to be nice to the widow. It's all though it does that to take care of the widow, but also it's to raise up the name of the deceased among the people of Israel, right? To keep his name going in society. So maybe because this guy refuses to continue the name of his, deceased cousin, whatever, Machlon, in Israel, his name is erased, right? Since he won't keep up his deceased cousin's name going, his name isn't kept going. So that might be the most likely thing going on. So turn down, sit down here, Ploni Almoni. And he turned down and sat down. So again, this town square, everyone walks through like it's a place where everyone hangs out. And Boaz sees him, and they sit down and they start to talk. Verse 2, and he took 10 men of the town elders, right? So essentially affecting a court. And so 10 guys, again, because everyone hangs around in this area. Again, it's probably useful to think of Damascus Gate or Morristown Green, whatever, and said, sit down here. And they sat down, right? Boaz is the kind of guy who can tell a group of elders to sit down, and they're like, okay, right? Like, this is, again, part of the point of Boaz is that he's like he's an upstanding guy in the community. Verse 3, and he said to the redeeming kin, Naomi, who came back from the plains of Moab, sold the parcel of the field that was our brother Elimelech's. Brother here likely being a not meaning son of the same parent, but relative. This is brother in the broad sense. And as for me, I thought, I shall alert you, saying, acquire it in the presence of those seated here and in the presence of my people's elders. If you would redeem, redeem. And if you will not redeem, for all my people's town knows that you are, and if you would not redeem, tell me that I may know that there is none except you to redeem, and I am after you. So this is something we didn't know before, which is a little complicating to the text. It suggests that Naomi actually did inherit some land, which she would have inherited from her sons, but either had to sell it or is in the process of selling it because of her poverty. So earlier, when it was just Ruth and Naomi, we had the sense of sort of like total poverty, which is why Ruth has to go out and glean. But here it seems that there is something that she inherited, but she's being forced to sell it. Now, selling land is problematic in ancient Israel because the land is apportioned by tribes, right? And you have to, and you're supposed to sell only within your tribe, so that the land remains, so that the tribal land remains contiguous. So that's the redemption, right? Like they're supposed to, the redeeming kinsman is supposed to buy the land in order to make sure that the territory remains like in the family and in the tribe. One last thing on that, this could, if she owns the land, it must be from her sons, because biblical law, the wife doesn't inherit from the husband. When the husband dies, it goes to the sons, or if there aren't sons, to the brother. But a mother can inherit from sons. So the order must be Elimelech had the land, died, went to the sons died, and then it goes back up to Naomi. And here Boaz is saying she either had to sell and we have to like bail and we have to like stop that sale, as it were, or we have to step in to keep this land in the family and the tribe. Got it? So that's what's going on. And
Rabbi, I have a question. Excuse me.
Figured that was too much for that. Yeah.
While Ruth is out gleaning, what is Naomi doing the whole time? Is she sitting around doing nothing? Is she thinking of ways, pushing her Ruth again towards marriage? Or, I mean, what is she doing?
We don't know. We don't have that scene. Meaning like we know she's doing something. And like, is Naomi sort of like not, like, is she like physically unable to glean? Like, maybe. Is she too ashamed to glean? Maybe. Is she like embarrassed? Like there's lots of possibilities out there, but we don't know. So this is the midrashic moment. We can fill in the blanks. What do we think of Naomi? Is she home just like painting her toes, or is she again like she's just a generation older than Ruth, who was married for 10 years, right? So we don't know. But again, you could make your own midrash on that one.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
Well, in relation to that, I've been thinking that in addition to the story about conversion, I'm thinking it's a lesson in how to respect your elders. And, you know, in terms of Naomi and Ruth, you know, Ruth is doing everything she can to respect Naomi, no matter how Naomi treats her, disregards her, whines about the loss of her husband and brothers. She sticks with her, doesn't expect anything in return. And I think for us, it's a lesson on how we should think of our elders. Also, Boaz is, you know, an elder. And again, Ruth doesn't look for a younger man. She's willing to, you know, go with him.
Yeah, so that, right. So I think that is right. Naomi does keep her promise, it seems, to Naomi, like I'm with you, I'm loyal, and she follows through with that, and with Boaz, she is both assertive and deferential, right? Like she does the whole nighttime thing, and she makes clear that she's no pushover, right? She knows she doesn't have any real power, right? But she says, "You're the redeemer. Like you can do this." Like she doesn't wait around for Boaz to be like, "You know what? I think I might be your redeemer." Like she doesn't wait for that to happen. She, again, like she very forwardly does this, but not, but you know, with something of a respectable distance, right? Like so, yes, absolutely, that's the case. Ruth is seen as Boaz is a mensch, and in many ways so is Ruth. Naomi, you know, sort of jury's out. But yes, so Boaz, convening a court of 10 elders, and Ploni Almoni, his cousin, this other redeeming kinsman, says, "All right, we have witnesses assembled here. Do you want to redeem the land?" In other words, like you have to buy the land, and then it's yours, and you have to declare it now, and we'll all witness it. But if you don't want to do it, then it falls to me. So I've got to know. Verse 5 is or then the end of verse 4 is Veomer Aoni Egal. And so the Redeemer, the cousin, says, "I'll redeem it." So Boaz says, "Do you want to exercise your rights as a Redeemer?" And the guy says, "Yeah, I can do that. More land, sure." Boaz says back to him, "So when you acquire the property from Naomi and from Ruth the Moabite, you must also acquire the wife of the deceased, so as to perpetuate the name of the deceased on his estate." And the redeeming kin said, "I cannot redeem lest I spoil my estate. You redeem my obligation of redemption, for I cannot redeem." Now, notice how Boaz set that up there. He's like, "There's a chance to acquire some land here. Do you want to acquire the land?" "Yeah, I'm in for acquiring the land. Oh, by the way, when you acquire the land, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite for life. So the land and Ruth, you in?" And he's like, I'm out. So he had a smile from Linda Glinsman there, right? So so Boaz presumably deliberately first sets it up as an easy thing, and then plays the Ruth card. So what's going on with that? notice here also, this is the one place where he calls her Ruth the Moabite. You would think, I would think, to make her less attractive, right? There's no there's no hiding. Like, not only is this a greater obligation in terms of more mouths to feed, etc., but also it means taking in somebody from the despised Moabites into your household. Boaz is willing to do it, but he seems to be gambling that this guy isn't, and he is right. So so maybe he's married. He doesn't want to spoil his estate. That means, so like, if he so it could mess up his household in terms of maybe there are other wives on the scene or other children on the scene. Something like, it's not. He doesn't want any part of adding Ruth to his household.
Art Scroll explains it.
Rakasha.
It's very easy. Delicately, Boaz implied that the Redeemer should marry Ruth, to which he replied, Mahlon and Chilion died only because they married Moabite women. Shall I then go and take her?
Yes, so that, by the way, is so they're taking that from the Midrash, which is a possible option, which is to say, think of the parallel story that's our companion through this, which is the story of Judah and Tamar. Remember, and Onan sleep with Tamar and die, and then Judah's like, I'm not giving Shelah to her. Like, what we're told is that lest he die, right? Again, she's a black widow. So the so this guy could be thinking the same thing that Judah thought. Everyone else I know who slept with who sleeps with Moabite women dropped dead. How about I not sleep with a Moabite woman? All right.
I think that's a cheap shot, Rabbi.
It could be a cheap shot, but it also could be, because we know it from the parallel story, it could actually be the case, but we don't know. Yes.
Rabbi, also, if he does marry Ruth, the land would not go to him. It would go to the offspring.
Right.
So he really wouldn't get the land.
Correct. And we don't know his situation. Boaz is a wealthy guy. He doesn't need the money. Maybe Boaz likes Ruth's companionship more than he needs the money, and he's willing to sort of like take on the expense, as it were, of a wife, in order to and not without the promise of a children that will count for him, because like he sort of like took to her right away, and in the nighttime encounter, certainly, like they both took the measure of each other and took the other as being like decent people. Like, he's like, you seem to be smart enough to get what's going on and like aren't trying to like aggressively seduce me, so like, you have some values, like I think is like part of like what he's saying in the context of the story, and she's somewhat similarly. Yeah. So here the guys he sets up the situation, and the Ploni Almoni, the unnamed redeemer, says, no, I can't do it, you can. And as I think it might be JPS that points out, Boaz in his speech uses the word redeem like more than 5 times in that one verse. Versions of the word redeem he uses again and again, just like in Vayigash, and the Torah reading that we would do this weekend, or that we read from this morning. Judah, in his speech to Joseph, refers to their father, I think 5 times or 6 times in the short speech, like pulling on Joseph's heartstrings, like, don't hurt my father, our father. Here he keeps talking about redemption in verse 6, or verse 5, right? So the guy says, redeem my redemption, for I cannot redeem. Verse 7, and it was in former times. And now the narrator steps in. And the narrator here, again, seems to be describing something that the readers of the book of Ruth wouldn't have known without this narration, indicating, certainly at the very least, that the book is being written at some historical distance from the events described, that it's describing a story where the rules have changed since then. This is consistent with what I've mentioned before, like this idea that it was common law and changing, that the principles remain the same. Everyone understands what a redeemer is, but here, like the details of it are described, how the law works, because obviously the law in the time of the reader is different from the law in the time of the story, of the narrative. Verse 7, thus it was in former times in Israel concerning redemption and concerning exchange, fulfill every condition. A man would remove his sandal and give it to his fellow man. And this was the practice in Israel. Right? Like, so so there's a version of that in Deuteronomy, but for Yibum. So like this is a similar process. And again, the narrator seems to feel the need to explain it to the audience. And the Redeemer said, you acquire it. And he removed his sandal. And Boaz said to the elders and the people, you are witnesses today that I have acquired all that was Elimelech's and all that was Chilion and Machlon's from the hand of Naomi. And also Ruth the Moabite, wife of Machlon, I have acquired for myself as wife, to raise up the name of the dead on his estate, that the name of the dead will not be cut off from his brothers and from the gate of his place. You are witnesses today. Right? Like, so again, like he's very clear, like he's done his homework. He knows the system. He's got his witnesses there and explains step by step what's going on. So there is no ambiguity as to what's happening, right? So this is his acquiring the estate and all that belonged to them, and that this is the act of the Redeemer. Verse 11. And all the people who were in the gates and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman coming to your house, like Rachel and like Leah, both of whom built the house of Israel, and do worthy things in Ephrathah, and proclaim a name in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Peretz, to whom Tamar gave birth by Judah, from the seed that this young woman will give you. So this is sort of like this is the blessing that everyone gives to Boaz and to Ruth, which is a sort of sweet moment, right? She's still called Ruth the Moabite. She can't get around, like even when she marries Boaz, even the act of marriage, she's still Ruth the Moabite, right? She can't get rid of the title. But what's sweet is, note the blessing they give her. They say she should be like Rachel and like Leah, right? Like the matriarchs of Israel. And so there's also notes, like she sort of becomes like an honorary matriarch in this telling. And they give a blessing that, is similar to what is given to daughters on Friday nights, right? It's sort of a nice moment. But here you see the legal transaction taking place, that they're witnesses, town square, everyone says everything, everyone's gathered around and watching this thing all play out. Ruth and Naomi, like it's a transaction among men, whereas much of the story is focused on the women's sphere, of the conversation between Naomi and her daughters-in-law, then between Naomi and Ruth, then Ruth and Boaz, then back to Naomi and Ruth, and then and now Boaz, like sort of like affecting Naomi and Ruth's plan in public. And so they give. So all the town people give a blessing. They link it to Peretz and Tamar and Judah, right, who are ancestors of Boaz, and bless them with children. Verse 13. And Boaz took Ruth the Moabite, again with Ruth the Moabite, and she became his wife. And he came to bed with her, and the Lord granted her conception, and she bore a son. That sort of like drawn out description isn't so common, but maybe is used here. Remember, like as is relatively common in biblical texts, she is barren before and then granted conception, right? So the impression is that she struggled to conceive before, and now now she's clearly able to. God grants her the ability to do so. She bears a son, and of course that son will count to Machlon, to her deceased husband. And
Rabbi,
not, yeah.
Art Scroll doesn't call her Ruth the Moabite in the translation. Just calls her Ruth.
13. Let me check the elite. The 13. V'yikach Boaz et Ruth. All right. The Hebrew. So Boaz married Ruth. And he throws in Ruth the Moabite. 13. It could be altars. Altar throws in Moabite. I don't know if he's working off of. Occasionally, he takes from the non-Masoretic text, but the Masoretic text seems to have not Moabite, meaning consistent with Art Scroll, and JPS. Leave out Moabite. Let me check.
Rabbi, Jewish Study Bible also has just Ruth.
Yeah, I think that might be closer to correct. That seems like it's correct, meaning that that's consistent with the Masoretic text. So, by the way, if you want to read into that, then in terms of the text, if they drop Moabite there, then finally upon marrying Boaz, then she could be thought of as something else.
So there are two interesting comments in the Art Scroll comments. One, for verse 11, it says, and be famous in Bethlehem. And it says, and Al-Shich offers, may she no longer be called Ruth the Moabite, but Ruth of Bethlehem. And the other one that's even more interesting in my mind is on verse 13. It says, he took Ruth, she became his wife, and Hashem let her conceive. It says, on that very night, Boaz died. And it says, Yalkut Shimoni.
Right. Post Talmudic Midrash. That very night, Boaz died. That Boaz does the. If that's the case, then Ploni Almoni,
He was right.
he was right. That is not that is not a false charge. Maybe everyone who that's great midrash. That's incredible. May the Lord make the woman who's coming to health like Rachel and Leah. So there's so look, in any event, there's a sense of of celebration. Everyone seems to be happy and rejoice at this going on, meaning that there's a suggestion that everyone involved is well liked and they're happy to see something good happen. The JPS commentary also notes that sort of after the marriage, may the woman who's coming into the house be like Rachel and Leah, both of whom built up the house of Israel. The part of their commentary is in the remainder of the narrative, Ruth is no longer identified as Moabite, which throws against Alter's use of it seemingly unnecessarily in his translation after that point. Yeah. So people seem to be happy. May they be. So they translate, and may your house be like the house of Peretz, who tomorrow bore to Judah, through the offspring which the Lord will give you by this young woman, Na'ara Hazot. Again, even though she was married for quite some time, she's again referred to as a young woman, which seems to be what she's consistently referred to as. Verse 13, and Boaz took Ruth the Moabite, and she became his wife, and he came to bed with her, and the Lord granted her conception, and she bore a son. No mention of death there, but a powerful lesson. You'll see in a moment why the Midrash can get away with saying, the one that Rana just mentioned, why they can get away with saying it.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, can I ask you a question?
Mhm.
It says, may your house be like the house of Peretz. Why was the house of Peretz so important? Why would be something that they would say, your house be like that?
I would say it's not entirely clear to me. The JPS commentary on this is Peretz, offspring of an illicit union and a failed love right arrangement, which is nonetheless affirmed in the biblical text as right. By choosing this transgressive episode as a model for their blessing, the witnesses here may be acknowledging the irregular nature of the union between Boaz and Ruth, yet nonetheless affirming its rightness, which is to say, Peretz, the result of a union that technically shouldn't have been, Judah wasn't supposed to sleep with his daughter-in-law. But good things came out of it, and it was okay in the end. Similarly, should you really be taking a Moabite? Maybe not, but you should be blessed. Just like that sort of union of questionable kashrut turned out okay in the end, so too this one. Let's just admit that it's sort of weird, but let's hope it turns out. So could be that.
Okay.
Though I will say, though another JPS comment here, it's a full book on the short. It's a full volume on the short book, so there's a lot in there. Outside of Genesis and Ruth, Peretz appears in only a few genealogies, meaning he's not in all of them. A total of 12 times in the entire Hebrew Bible, 3 of them in Ruth. In Genesis 38, Peretz is a sign of both rupture and blessing, because the birth of twins usually symbolize divine blessing or approval. His prominence in Ruth, evident in this blessing and also in the concluding genealogy coming up, serves as a double function. His story helps legitimize the union of Ruth and Boaz, a union that is likewise under the cloak of suspicion, yet is here welcomed and affirmed. In addition, it underscores the unusual nature of this union and the ways in which it breaches the wall that has excluded Moabites. So God grants her a son. Verse 14, now we have a reappearance of the women. Remember, like when Naomi came back to town and all the women gathered around and started making a big deal about everything? Here they've been absent from the scene. Now they're back, as happens when a child is born. Verse 14, and the women said to Naomi, blessed is the Lord, who has not deprived you of a redeemer today, and let his name be proclaimed in Israel, and may he be a restorer of life for you and a support for your old age, as your daughter-in-law, whom you love, has borne him, and who has been better to you than 7 sons. So the women, as Alter notes, that when they returned to Bethlehem, they were greeted by a bevy of astonished, gossiping women. And now the women become a chorus to celebrate the birth of Naomi's grandchild. And you see the grandchild, of course, is, though there's no biological connection to Naomi, is counted as her grandchild, who they say, now you have somebody who will be a line that will provide for you. And Naomi and Ruth, we recognize that you have a loving relationship and she's stood by you. And again, better for you than 7 sons, which is just sort of like a wildly inflated expression of how good this relationship has been for Naomi. And notice, by the way, this is part of the Naomi, in coming back to town, made everything about her and nothing about Ruth. That sort of remains the case here. Verse 16, and Naomi took the child and placed him in her lap and became a nurse for him, or caregiver. Like, this obviously isn't a nurse in the literal sense. This is, like overseeing, grandmother, parent, partial parent role. And the neighbor woman called a name for him, saying, a son is born to Naomi, and they call his name Oved, for he was the father of Jesse, father of David. And this is the lineage of Peretz. Peretz begat Hezron, and Hezron begat Ram, and Ram begat Aminadab, Aminadab begat Nachshon, Nachshon begat Salma, and Salma begat Boaz, and Boaz begat Oved, and Oved begat Jesse, and Jesse begat David. So, fascinating things here. Why does the midrash that Rana cited get to say that Boaz is off the scene? Because even though there's no explicit reason to believe that, who names this child?
The women of the town.
The
The
women.
women of the town. Where do they come to name the child?
And why did it say the child belonged to Naomi? Was the
Yeah.
What? Right. So that's the thing. Like, so the end has all these like little weird twists.
Here's one more weird twist in the art scroll. It says that she nursed him. The Al Sheikh explains that Naomi was miraculously enabled to nurse the child.
Baruch Hashem. Right. So, I mean, the nurse, like, which you can get out of the text. Like, again, Alter's comment, he tries to get away from the Waler Midrashim. To cuddle the child and become a caregiver for him is, of course, a natural expression of a grandmother's love, but it also strongly suggests how the child has become a vivid replacement for the two sons Naomi has lost. It is by no means necessary to see this act, as some interpreters have done, as a formal ceremony of adoption, as it would be both odd and unnerving for a grandmother to adopt her grandchild while his mother was still alive. So she clearly, like, there's clearly this sort of like stepping in thing and like this and a closeness. JPS translates foster mother. Naomi took the child and held it to her bosom. She became its foster mother. Woman neighbors gave it a name. Like, so the omenet, they noted, a term that connotes trusty caregiver or parent in locos. The same word, by the way, this is something of a transition to where we're going to start after in January, after taking a week-long break. And omen, same, if she's an omenet, Mordechai is an omen to Esther. This sort of foster parent thing, Naomi is to Obed, as Mordechai is to Esther. Or at least it's the same word. And the same word is when Moses complains to God, like, when things get too much and Moses complains to God, saying that, am I a nurse to this people that I'm supposed to take care of them all the time? He uses the same word, omen, like I'm the nurse, like I'm the foster parent of this people that you expect me to take care of. So same word here. Then the woman gave a name. Usually, so most typically, again, JPS note, in the Bible, a child is typically named by the mother. See Rachel and Leah in Genesis 29 and 30, or occasionally the father. See Genesis 16, 15, 21, 3. That's those are the Abraham's the stories. So usually it's a mother or father. Here, there's a strange situation of vague of the name. They call the name Oved. Only here, Alter's note, is a name given to a child by neither father nor mother, but by neighbor women. It's probably a reflection of the importance of the community of women in the story. The name Oved, which occurs elsewhere, means worshiper, like maybe short for Ovadia, the worshiper of God. Like so Alder reads this possibly as like if like the heart of the story is about female friendship, or we can go a little over today so we can get to the end. If the heart of the story is about female friendship, then sort of like this community of women like getting together to like care for and even name seems to be part of that. That part of the focus of the story is this connection between women that we don't find focused on elsewhere in the Tanakh, even if it presumably existed.
It's almost like a Greek chorus.
This story had a narrator at one point who breaks in. So
Yeah.
if this narrator, he could have interjected other things that are strange in the story all along.
Right. But here, notice the narrator is coming in. Now at the end, it's all narrator, right? And the narrator is telling us though, again, for a story that focuses so much on women, it could conceivably be a she, though somewhat less likely. We don't know. Like but the narrator tells us what's central about this, and maybe tells us why the story is being told at all, which is Oved is Jesse's father, and thereby David's grandfather. David, of course, will become king in Israel. David will be the forerunner of the Mashiach. David will establish the royal dynasty in Judah, and this is his ancestry. Peretz is the descendant, where then the next part is tracing Boaz to Peretz and Judah and Tamar, and we know Ruth to Moab and Lot and his daughters, and all of that leads to King David.
Rabbi,
And by in the Septuagint, this is this is in the writing, sort of like with other short books. In the Septuagint and in Christian Bibles, this is just before the book of Samuel, which then leads into the time of David. Yes.
The book of Ruth is so different from everything else we've studied the past 5 years. There's no treachery, no violence, no explicit sex, no evil person. It's like Hollywood would rate it G, not even PG.
Yes. So it's sometimes called a pastoral.
I was disappointed.
You're right,
I loved
exactly.
it.
Yeah, it is a quiet, pleasant interlude amongst all the sort of blood and sex and maybe you don't need to be you don't need fancy degrees to be like, maybe this is linked to the fact that it's focusing on women's lives and not men's lives. But yes, totally.
And they never had any more children, just the one son.
We're not told of it.
Could have been dead, Elaine.
Ruth could have died in childbirth too. You don't know.
Correct. We're not really. I mean, they. I mean, the blessing of the townswomen seem to imply that Ruth is still on the scene, even if Naomi is like again coming in and stealing her thunder. Right, like again, Naomi sort of, it's all about Naomi, but and Ruth disappears after giving.
But so does Boaz.
And so does Boaz
Until he comes and he's born into my family. There you go.
Yep. The
Jewish Study Bible note for 16 says it is unlikely that Naomi has become the child's wet nurse.
Correct.
Or symbolizes the complete reversal. But it symbolizes the complete reversal of Naomi's ill fortune, her restoration to fullness, and a continuation of her family. It is possible that the association of the child with Naomi rather than Ruth is meant to remove the taint of foreign birth from the child.
Right. Though
Oh.
Right. Though it's sort of hard to do because the whole story is about it, right? Is about this. The whole story seems to be not burying the difficult detail. Ruth is a Moabite. We keep hitting the fact that Ruth is a Moabite, and she is the grandmother of David. Like, there's just no like. It seems integral to the story that that's the
Great-grandmother.
case. That it's not, again, like for us, it's important to note, what better day than today, that the messianic line, as it were, is like just isn't clean. It has all of these problematic aspects and like this weird semi-seduction and all this other sort of thing. It is it's just very far from an immaculate conception, or virgin birth, right? Like it's there's a very earthy element to it, again, from the Ruth aspect, from the nighttime semi-seduction aspect, to the Judah and Tamar aspect, to the Lot and his daughters aspect. Like, that's where redemption comes from, and that's part of it. So what's the story doing there? I mean, that's always for all of us to figure out. But like but it is, but there's a beauty in it, in both its peacefulness, as noted, and its focus on women's lives and emotions, as noted, and in the fact that it's sort of like it's admitting that no, like life isn't always perfect and clean, but that doesn't mean that greatness can't come from it. Holiness can come from unexpected places, and just because somebody has a problematic background or a background that you don't approve of, doesn't mean that it's not going to be all for the best.
But why are they condemning the Moabites? What do they do that they condemn? It seems like they're condemning them. Oh, you're a Moabite. You're bad.
Right. So that's where we started. Like, the Moabites were both the descendants, in the Tanakh of the result of incest, and they attacked Israel in the desert unprovoked. So all of these things, like they were seen as mortal enemies. It's almost it's like being linked to, I don't know, if you're running for office, you might not want to be married to an Iranian. I don't know, like, like it's, or a North Korean. Like, it's sort of like it's a lineage that many people in society would cast a suspicious eye towards.
So,
all right.
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yes.
Are there, as we study, are there sources such as the Art Scroll, I'm only saying this because Rana had read it, that don't identify Midrash as Midrash and make it sound as if it's Torah?
Orthodox sources often, modern or contemporary Orthodox sources often will do that. Art Scroll explicitly mixes, but most others don't. There's Mitsuda, also out of Lakewood, will do the same. So Feldheim, JPS and Robert Alter, like sort of like more secular sources, won't do that, but Art Scroll and their contemporaries will. But anything coming out of the Haredi world will. But most others will make clear the distinction. So this, thank you for rolling along with this. It's enjoyable. I find this a fascinating book, partly for what it says and what it doesn't say, and sort of like then throwing it up against the other parts of the tradition. And it's really beautiful and moving, I think, and shows some of the breadth of the tradition. What we're gonna do is, I hope, we'll take next week off, and then in 2 weeks start up again, which will be early January, Bezrat Hashem, and we'll start with the next piece of the puzzle, which will be a similar read of the Book of Esther. Esther, obviously, we read through comparatively quickly on Purim, which will be at the very end February. But again, that is unlike other books in the Tanakh, and we'll do a read of that. It's in the same volume of Robert Alter for those who want it. Just like JPS has a full slim volume for Ruth, they have one for Esther as well.
1985 in the JTS.
Yeah.
Rabbi, will we need to have groggers with us?
I have my own noise makers in the other room.
Yeah, this group doesn't have a problem with making noisy interruptions, so I trust. So I trust we're going to stay close to form. All right, Adkan, thanks for sticking with me, but I wanted to make sure that we finished this today, and we'll do, for those who wish, we'll have class tonight at 7, tomorrow night davening at 7 p.m. and Shabbat morning a vote at 9.